Everybody, how you doing? It's Mark Ross, ITK Radio. It's June, what is it? June 9th. Oh my gosh. Joining us today, John Hall. John Hall is a prolific fundraising campaign strategist. He's been doing this, I don't know, I want to find out, since mail. Now he's doing digital. He's seen it all. We're here to talk about campaigns, elections, and cash. John, how you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Mark.
So how long have you been a quote unquote fundraiser for campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, really, I would say 12 years. I mean, I've been involved in campaigns. This is like my 21st year or something, which is like hard to believe. But I've been working on digital, really focused on online fundraising since um, 2000, early 2011.
So yeah, which is interesting. So the I always talk about like the iPhone comes out in '07. Like actually the iPhone Obama announces in '07, like the iPhone comes out later that year, '07, '08. And I always remind people that Obama announced before the iPhone. So we think about how the smartphone and digital, people think it's been with us for a long time, but in reality, it's not really been that long. So I guess did you start and you worked on campaigns prior to that? I mean, did you start from like a more traditional direct mail world and then kind of gravitate to the digital space, or was that just the natural evolution?
Yeah, I was actually a campaign manager. So I was Mike DeWine's campaign manager for his attorney general race in 2010. I was a field person. Like I came up doing victory, like recruiting volunteers to come to phone banks, recruiting volunteers to do
Love
non-elected
it.
mail.
Yeah.
And so I joined a company, Targeted Victory, back in 2011. I knew the owners at the time. So I joined that, decided I liked online fundraising because I got to see the results immediately. So you place an online ad, you place the ad, you get a report that shows you how many impressions you got, but that's kind of what you get to see. With online fundraising, I'd send an email and I'd know I raised $50 or I raised $1,000 or I raised $0. And it was pretty easy and quick to kind of get that sense if it's working or not. And like I think those of us that do this for any period of time will tell you it really is like a drug. It's like a dopamine hit, or I'm sure it's a dopamine hit when you have a good fundraising concept and it works, and it's just fun. Now the other side is when things don't work, it's not fun, but that's kind of how I got into it. I liked the immediacy of it, and then have really focused my career the last 12 years on online fundraising, working with a huge number of organizations. And I was super fortunate to be with a really big firm that did a lot of online fundraising along the way. So that really helped.
So yeah, I love that you're in the field. Like, I was chatting with somebody yesterday, a young, policy pro, and I was like, yeah, you should definitely work on a campaign. There's nothing like going to somebody's door, doing a phone bank, asking for, face to face, somebody to vote for you, and being on the campaign trail. I mean, I don't want to project, but has that helped you? Like really spending time in the trenches, so to speak, doing the phone banking stuff, the door to door, some of the nitty gritty work of campaigns to your new career?
Yeah, I think so. And I think Eric Wilson actually has some posts that he talks about this quite a bit. And I mean, he's right in the way he says it too, is like, I think that what it helped me the most with is actually gain a level of empathy that you don't have if you just become a consultant. Like so many people nowadays with the rise of these big firms have never worked on a campaign. They don't understand what it's like to be on a campaign. Like the candidate really dedicates their life to running. Most of them, I guess some don't, but most, it's 100% of their life, which means
Right.
they're having dinner with their family, they're talking about what's going on in the campaign. So they might text you at dinner time. When they're getting ready to go to bed, they're talking to their spouse about what happened in the day. They're going to text you needing something. When they wake up at 3 a.m. and have a random idea, they're going to send you this message, because for the candidate, it's their entire life. It becomes their job. And so a campaign staff, I think, really, as a staff or on the campaign directly, you really have to, you get used to it, and you have to realize it's also your life. And I think consultants a lot of times don't have that same mindset if they haven't worked on a campaign, because for them, a lot of times it's a 9 to 5. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a job. So they don't like have the same level of empathy. And so they end up getting annoyed when a campaign asks them for something at 7:30 at night every single night. It's not that the campaign wants to do that. It's kind of the natural ebb and flow of, I think, a campaign when that is your entire life. So I think that has helped me more than any of the practical experience. Obviously, I learned a bunch of things working on campaigns, like how you talk to people. Like I used to, like, I mean, I think an example is like when you go door to door, or if you're at a parade, you're handing out something, you can't ask someone if they want it. You just hand it to them and they take it, because people don't want to be rude, and they don't, and people don't tell you that, but you learn it doing it enough times. And I think those types of things, like while that sounds weird, that kind of a lesson kind of takes you to figure out how do you do online fundraising, because it's all the same mentality. Like if you're just asking people to give you $5 and you don't give them a reason, or there's not like a hook behind it, like some kind of good concept hook behind it, nobody's going to give you $5. But again, just like handing them the literature, if you give them something that they can't say no to, they're gonna end up contributing. They're gonna end up contributing to you.
And both of like I spent a lot of quality time in Ohio. Like, I graduated from Bowling Green, and basically grew up my life between Toledo and Detroit, and did a little bit of college politics in Ohio and some Bush stuff back in the day. And I don't know. To me, like there's something great too. I don't want to. I mean, just doing politics in Ohio, right? It's got a good mix of big cities, urban, rural. You still have like city parades. You still have people going to the Bob Evans trying to figure out what's going on in the world. So, where other, like bigger states like Texas, Florida, which are much more media market driven, I don't know. There's real value, like I said, working a parade, talking to voters one on one.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I worked for those people who know Mike DeWine, he is the ultimate retail politician. That is what he likes the best. It's what I think is the best at. I mean, we did, I can't even remember the number, but I'm certain it was in like 50, 60 parades in 2010. And people will laugh about like it's such a waste of time because you're not talking about issues. But when you're not running for a super high profile office, I mean, AG's somewhat high profile, but it's not like a governor's race. People aren't paying attention to the issues. They vote for you if they like you. They vote for you if they know your name. They also, the environment has a big factor in that too. But I think that I do think that you kind of learn when you're on campaigns, especially if you're like kind of down ballot campaigns, the importance of that personal connection that you can only get in a state, I think, like Ohio, where you have to go to all 88 counties. You have to go to all the Bob Evans, like you mentioned, like there's one in, I mean, I don't know if there still is, but there used to be about one in every county. So you go to Bob Evans, you get breakfast, you talk to the local county GOP officials, and you kind of go on your way. But yeah, I think there's huge value. I think anybody that is working in politics, that is on the consulting side, there is huge value in going and working on a campaign, because there's just so much stuff you're going to learn. I mean, you're going to learn, like I said, you're going to learn the empathy that you need to, I think, to be a better consultant, but you're also just going to understand, I think, better that you have to think of things that could be around the corner. Like they're so fast paced. There's so many things that happen. There's so many issues that occur. Like I wish I could remember some stories of just like random stuff that would happen, but you start your day thinking you're going to do one thing and you end up having to do something different because like things happen. And I don't know that you get that anywhere other than a political campaign. It's just so fast, and it's huge value. Everyone should do it.
Yeah, there's also huge value in knowing, when you're out in the field, where the best truck stops are and the best Bob Evans in any state, which is a real, then you know you're dealing with a real operative.
And where the police interstate.
Yeah. Talk about so now you're a bit more removed from the field, but you're still dealing with candidates. I'm like, can you explain to the listeners like the process? Like, how do you get hired by a candidate or a political organization? Like, do you approach them? Do they approach you? Is it just, are you building relationships? And then how do you differentiate yourself and say, listen, this is our secret sauce, or this is what we're good at, and this is why we think we can help you meet your political objectives?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is, it goes back to we were talking about it. It's working on campaigns gives you the ability to build relationships with people. I think in politics, there's like the idea of like who you know. Like, I mean, and that actually isn't even a bad thing necessarily in politics. It's just very hard to get a job if people don't know you. Not that you have to be someone's son, or you have to be someone's cousin, or you have to like be from a very affluent family, but you do kind of have to be known by someone. That I think is the number one thing I would say if you're going to work for a campaign. I mean, if you're starting out, if you're looking for an internship, if you're looking out for a very entry-level job, it's not so much important. But like as you go through the ranks, as you're looking for the higher level jobs on campaigns, it really is about getting to know people and building those relationships. And I think that is probably the number one thing, is how you get business in our business. It's almost all referral based. You can find out, like, I mean, occasionally people will put in RFPs, or put out RFPs. And so like the RNC, for instance, last year put out an RFP for their text messaging and for their ads. And you can go and you can apply for those types of things. But for a campaign, that's not what they're doing. Like when they're going and they're looking for a digital vendor, when they're looking for their digital director, when they're looking for any position, they're going to ask whoever they know, do you know someone that does email? Do you know someone that can do my online fundraising? Do you know someone that places ads? And that is like, I would say, the most important thing. And so in the work that I get, I actually don't know. I'm trying to think. I mean, I've worked with, I don't want to exaggerate it, but I've probably worked with 100 campaigns in the last decade, like directly. And I don't know that there's one case where I sat down and said, oh, I really want to work for X. Let me go find someone and talk to someone about getting in front of X. Like that just isn't how it happens. Like what happens is you get a call, like I would get a call from another consulting firm saying, we really want you to do online fundraising for Senator so-and-so. Are you interested? And then we'd put in a proposal, you go through the process. Now, the introduction, I think a lot of times is that word of mouth type thing. But a lot of times getting the actual work, like getting the job, really does come to what differentiates you from anybody else. Like, I think that a history of success is like really good. Like for me, like I did NRSC fundraising for 8 years. So I was with them for like a really long time. And so being able to point back to, we took a program that I think had raised like $4 million before the cycle we started to $170 million the cycle that we ended. Like that's a pretty good point of success to show. Like we took something that was very, very small, took it to a place that was the biggest fundraising channel, individual fundraising channel that the committee had. And I think that so you need to have some success, but I'd say making connections. I was talking to someone actually someone that works for me yesterday, and I was telling him that it's like the most important thing I think you can do is get to be known, have people have people know who you are, have people like you. Hopefully they don't dislike you, but have people like you, and have some successes, like being able to point back and say, this is what I have done, this is what I believe, and having like I think this is, I guess, another factor, but having kind of like a North Star of what you believe. Like today, like if you hear me talk, like I talk to quite a few folks about online fundraising, that's kind of become my thing. And like, I just think we've done it wrong. Like we've done it incorrectly. And so kind of my North Star is we have to treat donors better. Like, and so when I go in and I pitch people, like I'm actually writing a proposal right now for someone, and it's, you would hire us because we approach fundraising differently. Like we're going to treat donors better. We're going to hopefully get more donations per donor from your people. You're going to be able to be really proud of the program we're running for you. We're not going to do fake matching. We're not going to do any of the fake stuff. And so you have to figure out like what is kind of your lane and what you want to focus on.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about the donor management and that philosophy. I came from like, I did PAC fundraising, which, is like bit more high dollar, a lot more, care and feeding, dinners. It's kind of a different approach. But it's super important keeping, the donors happy. I mean, they are not only obviously super interested in politics, but, they're contributing to the campaign. So, but before that, like can you talk about like the difference between like a senatorial committee versus a presidential campaign versus an individual, a House race, and then how do you say, like, for the committee, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but for this campaign in, Ohio, Northeast Ohio, we're going to do this. I assume there's some overlap in the strategy and tactics, but there must be some nuances based on culture, the organization, et cetera. How do you wrestle with that and keep that all straight? I mean, 100 different efforts, there it must be at times hard to keep straight, or is it just like you have a process that you modify?
Yeah. Well, luckily it wasn't 100 all the time. So campaigns on the Senate side, they're only up every 6 years. So it's like beneficial that we did. I focus most of my effort on Senate stuff. But I think that the biggest difference is committees are like have an infrastructure that is going to be consistent. So like it's going to run like the day after the election, you're still going to be fundraising. They are an entity that is somewhat known. Now, NRSC is not known by every single voter in America, but NRSC is known by some people. The Senate committee, like people know who they are. The House committee, people know who they are. And so the strategies you can use a lot of times are more kind of building infrastructure type things. Like you can do membership cards. Like membership cards work really well for a committee because it's a thing that you would expect you could get a membership to, or you could get a membership from. And so you do those types of things. You talk about your field programs in multiple states. You talk about funding ads in many states. But you can also, like the committees can also be a little bit of chameleons because they can be whatever is in the news. So if something around, I mean, it's not anymore, but if something around Obamacare came up, you could do a lot of stuff around Obamacare. You don't have to worry about the position as much because you're not really representing one, or you're not representing one elected official and one elected official's position. Whereas when you go over to the candidate side, a lot of it is more personality driven. Like you do need to figure out, what is your candidate going to say? How do they say it? What is the type of messaging that they're going to use? What is their voice? And you focus more of your efforts around that. So it's much more, I mean, it's obvious, but it would be individual focus. So if you're doing Mitch McConnell fundraising in 2020, it is all about what Mitch McConnell believes, but also Mitch McConnell's effort to win the Senate majority. And that's different than Susan Collins' messaging in 2020, which was Susan Collins is an independent voice for Maine, and she's going to keep fighting. She is going to keep fighting for the people of Maine. And it's just, you have to figure out in each individual candidate how they're going to talk about their race, how the race is going to be talked about, and how you're going to do fundraising. And going back to the point about like Mitch McConnell and Susan Collins, I was involved in both in 2020, and they were very different strategies, because Susan Collins is coming from a very competitive state, like a more of a Democratic state than a Republican state. She's super popular. She's an awesome politician, but I mean, she's not this red meat conservative that's going to go out and talk about very firebrand things. So the program that they ran was much more about her and much more about what she's doing. And it was a lot more Maine centric than it was national. Whereas Mitch McConnell's program just is a different type of program, just because he was the leader, but he also is from a more conservative state. The race, even though the Democrats wanted to pretend like it was going to be really close, was not super close. So he could be a little bit more aggressive on copy. And so, but I mean, you have to approach every single one differently. And that's also different from NRSC, who could jump in and out of each race as things improved or got tougher. It just, and so it gives you, I think the committees have just a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, you're spot on about Susie Collins. I was actually at an event this week, and even though the topic was, geopolitics and, military and Ukraine and China, I mean, she mentioned it felt like Maine always came back into the conversation. Like, she's a very good politician. Can you talk about like what you do? I mean, I'm envisioning there's like the landing page, but it's also, as you mentioned, copy, the difference between like a digital ad versus an email solicitation, writing that stuff up, absorbing the information yourself, paying attention, what's happening in the political sphere, but also I assume you get a lot of polling stuff dumped on you, also understanding the cadence of the campaign, what's going to happen. Can you just give a brief overview of how that all comes together and like really the 5 or 6 things that you're putting together to get a donor to say yes to contribute money?
Yeah, I mean, it starts all with building a list of people. Like, I think that is like what probably gets missed the most of it. Like, your success, whether you're successful in your fundraising or not successful in your fundraising, is, do you have people to talk to, and who are you talking to, and are you talking to the right people with the right message? And so the first step really is building a list. It's going out and figuring out, are these going to be likely donors? Can we run a petition to these likely donors? Like, run a petition, whether it's you run an ad on Facebook on a specific petition, or you send a rental email, you rent someone's list and you send an email out asking people to sign this petition or take this survey, or do you do a peer-to-peer text message, like doing the same thing, and you build this list. And then I think the way that it works best is then when you're able to keep track of what these folks care about, and you actually talk to them about the things that they care about. If they signed a petition on Obamacare, and you know that you're going to be talking about Obamacare in your race a lot, having emails go to them and text messages go to them talking about that issue is going to work better than if you start talking about, pick another topic. That doesn't mean that you can't talk about other things, because you're obviously going to, because the campaign is not going to be all about one energy or one, it's not going to all be about one topic, but at the same time, you do want to try to figure out, how do you talk to people about the things that they care most about? And then on a day-to-day basis, it's what is happening in the news. Polling is important, but polling is important in that it gives you a sense of like what the energy is like, but really what is dictating things. I used to tell people all the time, if you want to know what's going to fundraise today, just go look at Drudge News. Drudge Report, because
interesting.
If it is leading the news, like if it's in the news, it is going to raise a lot of money. Donald Trump is like a great fundraiser himself, but when the news all attacks him, so like this indictment stuff, I don't know that it's the indictment itself that helps him fundraise, but what helps him fundraise is the fact that everybody's talking about the indictment. And so attention is really the best thing that you can get for fundraising. So if the border and border security is leading drudge, it's all over Fox News, it's even on CNN and MSNBC. If something happens, that is going to be a better fundraising topic than whatever your best fundraising topic is the day before that. So it's being pretty nimble in terms of how, like, what you're gonna message on that day. And then also figuring out how do you tie it to an ask. And I think that's like one of the hardest things, because if you're talking about border security and you're running for House, for instance, like you, I guess, can ask for money because you're going to be supportive of border security, but you have to be like somewhat careful, because you got to make sure that the ask kind of passes like a sniff test. Like you can't say, give me $10 to build the wall, because giving $10 to you is not going to build the wall. It's actually what, I guess, Steve Bannon and some of those groups got in a little trouble for, is the soliciting for something that didn't actually happen. And so, but you've got to kind of you got to figure out when this topic is going on, how are you able to translate that to make sense to a donor that they're giving money to support or oppose that thing. And so that's why merchandise comes in a lot of times.
Oh, merch, yeah, because I guess it's not as news dependent. So, like, I mean, from a communication side, I mean, I tell clients or even myself, I think about like having an editorial calendar and being mindful of kind of tentpole activities. I mean, do you have stuff in the queue, or is it literally you wake up in the morning and say, okay, this is going to be the main focus? Is it you have to be that agile, that nimble, or is it a combination of the two?
It's a little of both. Like you kind of know, like most campaigns have like a content calendar or communications calendar in terms of next week we're going to talk about this issue. So you create a bunch of content around that issue, and you expect there's going to be some news coverage around it. And you have that set up. But you do have to be nimble in terms of, as things happen, you have to make changes. I mean, we used to on the committees always have a week or 10 day. I mean, NRCC did it different than NRSC, but they'd have between a 7 and 10 day calendar where each week would map out the next 7 to 10 days, create content for 7 to 10 days. But then each day you make the determination, am I going to send that content, or I'm going to pivot to something different? Because the good thing about digital, which is different than direct mail, is we are able to make a change and get a deployment out in minutes, essentially, and we see results in minutes. So you send an email, you can go from I tell a story about like when Colin Kaepernick, like when Nike created like shoes with the Betsy Ross flag on it, and Colin Kaepernick like freaked out. This was like 3 or 4 years ago, right before the 4th of July. It was like the 2nd of July. This all happened. Like NRSC went out with a shirt. Like we had a shirt created and out in an email within 2 hours of that happening. And they raised a huge amount, I think like $500,000 off of that shirt, selling it. But it was because we didn't plan it. It wasn't something that we knew we were going to do. Nobody knew Colin Kaepernick was going to protest, or even Nike was going to release these shoes. Like it wasn't
right
anybody's radar, but we saw that happening. And like I said, it was a Drudge moment. It was like all over the front of Drudge. We knew this was going to happen. We merchandised it. That's how we made the connection. Because if we had said just chip in because we need to stand up to Colin Kaepernick, like what is the NRSC or any politician going to do to stand up to Colin Kaepernick? I mean, you're not. Like there's nothing you can do. But you sell the shirt, a shirt that just has the Betsy Ross flag, and you're able to kind of take advantage of that moment. So we had a content calendar, obviously, for those days. We ended up canceling every single thing we did for like 6 days and only sold this shirt because that's what was working. And so it's a little bit of both. You have to be planned. You have to know that you have to have stuff ready. So if nothing comes up, but you have to also be nimble enough and pay attention to the news to be able to take advantage of moments as they occur.
Yeah, as we wrap up here, I'm gonna ask you just a few more. I love the Drudge stuff, man. Like it's still my like homepage. Like it's just amazing. Like the force that guy has become. Just, anyways. Can you talk about? I'm interested in the low dollar stuff. I mean, the D's, the Democrats seem to be doing better. They seem to have a bigger universe, or just how that has like changed politics in general. The gap between the R's and D's about the universe of people that are contributing, and then just small dollar stuff. Can you just talk about that? How that's like changed politics in general, and then when you hit send or upload something, like, are you testing, or do you have a pretty good idea? Like, yeah, this is gonna hit. I'm gonna raise $1 million, or is it still a bit of art and science?
So on the first question, like, yeah, Republicans, like we're far behind. Like we are really far behind. Like Politico did an analysis. The Democrats raised 5.5 million, or maybe it was 5 million. They had 5 million donors last cycle that were active, according to their analysis of Act Blue. Republicans had 2 million, according to their analysis from WinRed. And I think that's probably, whether it's 2 and 5 or whether it's 4 and whatever the numbers, I mean, I think it's probably like about that. It's like, it looks like it's like 2.5 times. Like you look at our candidates, like our candidates are almost all being outraised by huge amounts of money. And the only reason Republicans are staying in the race is because our super PACs are stepping up with huge spends, but it doesn't get us to parity because it's so much more expensive to run an ad from a super PAC than it is a campaign. Campaign gets the lowest rates. Super PAC pays essentially the highest rates. So you don't
Interesting.
get,
Yeah.
so you don't get the same efficiency. So if you spend $100 million out of a campaign on television, you're going to get far more ads at 100,000 or 100 million out of a super PAC. So we do have a problem. Like we have to figure out how to catch up on this space. And part of that is like, we do need to go out and figure out how do we get new donors. I think what the Democrats have done more of is, one, they have a much more collective ecosystem, for better or worse. If you're on Elizabeth Warren's list, you're going to get emails from her supporting every single Senate Democrat that's running, like everyone. Like you're going to get so many emails from her supporting them. On the Republican side, we don't really do that. So if you have a list, if you're candidate X and you have your own list and you're not in cycle, you're probably not sending a huge number of emails for anybody but yourself. So
they're much more like, and that's a cultural thing maybe too, right? They're more collective, and the Republicans are more individualistic.
Well, and we just have an industry, like we have a rental industry, which means that like our folks tend to rent their lists. They tend to put it out on the market. They make money off of renting their lists, as opposed to the Democrats, I think, do some rentals, but it's a lot more collective type fundraising. So I think that impacts us. But two, I just think we have not, like, we've focused on the wrong solutions for probably a little too long. Like WinRed's a great tool. They provide really good service. I mean, we use them for everybody that we work with. This is not anything against them, but we all thought, I mean, I didn't, but many people thought when they launched WinRed that was going to solve all of our problems, that our problem was a processing problem. But the reality was, like, we weren't behind the Democrats in 2018 because we had an inferior processor than ActBlue. Like maybe we did, but that wasn't the reason. Processing, it's a couple percentage points is what's going to change the margin. It's not going to be huge. We were behind back then 2 times, 3 times the Democrats. What we were behind on is investing. Like nobody invests in going out and finding new donors, really. Like everybody rents the same list over and over and over again. Like if you want to go out into the market, you go out, you rent a list. Like you're renting the same list, like you're Mitch McConnell, you're renting the same list that Susan Collins is renting, and you're renting that same list is being rented by Donald Trump, which is the same list that's being rented by Young Kim in California. Like these are all very different politicians with very different profiles and very different positions, but you're renting the exact same list over and over and over again. And so we just recycle those 2 million donors over and over and over again without going out and finding new donors. And it's just going to take a big investment. It probably costs about $100 a new donor. It's just going to take a huge investment to go in and find these new donors and add them into our ecosystem.
Yeah, and you wrote about that in Campaigns and Elections, and I guess that segues into your kind of care and feeding, experience. Like if it's $100 to acquire these donors, once we get them in the system, let's make them happy. And then, I mean, do you all too? Like, do you have your own donor list that you bring to the table? I mean, what's this? Or is it just strictly you push them off to somebody else? You never collect, like Apex doesn't have a database of donors.
No, we don't have a database of donors. Like, I mean, we go out to the market like everybody else and we say, like, we want to rent your list. Like I wouldn't classify it necessarily as pushing them off on people, but we'll go to, like, whether it's like the big vendors that are out there. So we'll go to Targeted Victory, we'll go to Campaign Solutions, we would go to Conservative Connector, we'd go to Donor Bureau, we'd go to all.
Because that's what they're really good at, I guess, too, because they're like hoovering up all kinds of other data to say, like, this is the profile, the micro targeting ideas, like, right? I mean, that's what they're good at. You guys are good at the copying and the strategy.
Well, I think it's more the side of they have discrete files that they're renting. So they have a candidate that wins or loses their election, wants to rent their file, they rent the file. And so it's not so much that, like, any of the firms, I mean, I'm sure there are firms that are going out mining new data, but it really is, the rental industry is a lot more of, this is the 2 million donors that are out there. You can go rent them from different people. Like, but it's not like they all have 2 million. Like, you might have a list of 100,000 here and there's 100,000 somewhere else and 50,000 at a different place. And you just go as a candidate, you just go and you rent these lists and you bring the donors into your ecosystem. I mean, what we are doing what we are doing some of is working with data providers to get non-donor lists. Like, so these aren't people that are donors. It's you could call it voter file. It's essentially just like people that they have phone numbers for, that they've done phone appends for, and doing messages to those folks, trying to get them to donate, trying to get them to take a survey, trying to get them to take an action to bring them into the industry. I mean, I think that there's some applicability with AI to make it far more targeted. I think everyone right now is using AI kind of on the content side, and I think, which is fine, but I think probably like not a great use of the power of AI, but like being able to actually do what you just said. You said some micro targeting. Like in the old days when we did micro targeting surveys on campaigns, you'd get 2 or 3 done an election cycle, and you'd base your entire campaign on that micro targeting survey. That by the time you were using it, the data is probably outdated because the news cycle changes so fast. Whereas AI could actually do that micro targeting on a minute by minute basis based on real-time results. If you're going out and you're sending an email and you get people clicking and you get people opening and you get people doing that, it could potentially reprofile based on that action, like truly in real time. And so I think that we're going to see in the next couple years some smarter strategies for what we call prospecting, essentially going finding new donors. That's more efficient. It's just today, if you're a campaign and you want to go out and you want to raise money, the first place you're probably going to go is to a rental vendor. And there's no problem with rental vendors. They're doing their job, but their job isn't to go out and find new donors. Their job is to maximize the value of the list that they have. And they have clients. They have clients that own the list, that give it to them and say, hey, will you broker this for me? And their job is to maximize that money. Their job isn't to go and for candidate Z, find new donors that nobody else has. And it's up to candidate Z and the candidate Z's consultants to figure out, how do I invest in going to find new donors that other people don't have, so that when somebody does something stupid, it doesn't impact me as much because I have my own user base that I am fostering and I am trying to treat well.
Can you, when like the art and science of it, like when you hit send, like you're like, you have a pretty good idea that this is going to work, or you take a flyer. Can you just talk about your confidence level and the dopamine hit when you are right?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be much better at it. I think that things have changed so much, or maybe I'm just getting old and not good anymore. But I mean, I used to have a pretty good sense of we know this is going to be a good concept. It's going to work. It's not going to work. Like now, it just is harder. It's harder to cut through, I think, is the bigger problem. So, I mean, people do testing. I mean, I think testing is like great. I think for the level of stuff that we do and the speed at which we generally operate, testing isn't great. Like the A/B test back in the day, everybody would run A/B tests on their subject line. They'd wait an hour. They'd send an A version, a B version. They'd usually do like 10% of their list to the A, 10% to the B. They'd hold 80% as the remainder. And then after an hour, they'd send to the winning results. Problem is, like, you'd end up with sending to the wrong one, like as often as you send to the right one, or there'd be no statistical difference in them. And so I think because of the level of content, like I'm not opposed. I think testing is great. I think though that for the level of content that we send in politics, like you have to be really, really thoughtful on the testing side to get any real results. It can't be minute details. And everyone always wants to talk about button testing. Like I've heard it like a billion times. Like people talking about how we're going to do button testing. It's like, great, do button testing. What you're going to find is what you're not doing today is going to win. That's what happens. You use a red donate button and you switch it to a blue contribute button. The blue contribute button is going to win every single time. Like 9 times out of 10, it will be the winner because it's different. So I think that I think like the way that we approach it is we look every single day at what is working, what isn't working. We keep very close eye on the type of copy we're using, the type of concepts. We build all of our content based on what is working as best as possible with variations in it and continuing to develop the message, continuing to like new topics. And then the kind of testing I would say like we do is we do a send, we'll do to a smaller portion of our list, and then we do expansions. Like we just generally won't roll out something brand new to everybody. You just do a smaller segment, you see if it works, you roll it out to bigger ones. That's not a true test. It's more just okay, this is doing better than the level that we have set in order to do an expansion. Then we do an expansion. If something works on our house file, so our house email, our house text file, we then will expand it out into the prospecting market. So we'll go rent text, we'll rent email, and then we'll do expansions based on that. And that's kind of how we operate. But I mean, it's crazy. Like things, like I said, in the old days, like I had a pretty good sense of this is going to work, it would work. This wouldn't work, it wouldn't work. I get surprised more today than I ever have been. But I, again, could just be that I'm like, I've lost my touch a little bit, but it also, I think that I just think there's so much more today. It's like,
I just think it's like, it's just like the competition get people's attention, whether you're Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, candidate running for office. I mean, It's hard, man. Like we're all trying to get attention, and some of these tools, like the AI stuff, the generative stuff, just makes it easier to kind of send out fluff, which isn't great for anybody. Curious, any thoughts on the RNC's requirement for the 40K donors, 40,000 donors to get on the debate stage? Good or bad, or is that just the nature of the business?
I think it's the nature of where we've gone. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's bad. I think it just kind of is. Like I'm not really for it. I'm not opposed to it. I mean, it does. I mean, I guess you wouldn't want someone who just decides they're running the day before just to jump on the debate stage, so I mean, they have to have some kind of requirement. So a donor requirement, I think, probably makes sense. I think that it's depending on how it escalates. I mean, it could be a challenge for many people. But I mean, I do think at the same time, hopefully what happens is some of the people that are trying to get the 40,000 donors are going out and investing and finding new donors, because that'd be good for the industry. Like if we're actually going and people are going and finding new people, not the folks that are on current rental lists, like not just doing rental emails and rental texts, but going out and doing more advertising to get these donors in the long run, it probably is really beneficial to the Republican ecosystem because it gives us a chance to add these new donors into the ecosystem, which just then means these people are more likely to donate to other candidates in the future. So probably a good thing. I mean, I guess we'll see how it escalates from the first debate to the second debate, but I think it's, I get the point of it. And I think it's okay.
Well, yeah, it's what I always get to, like self-funders, this is like a good campaign lesson. It's good to have people give you something because like they're more cognizant of your campaign, and there's some, there's value there of having invested in somebody, so to speak. So, hey, as we get out of here, when you're not reading the Drudge Report, anything you're reading, watching that's been fun, entertaining, boring, anything? Or are you all business right now?
No, I mean, I read. It's almost all political. Like, I mean, I've become much more of a Twitter. Like, I don't know if this is good or bad to say, but I've become much closer attention payer to Twitter than I ever was. Like, I mean, I quit. I did Twitter back in 2010, and then got off it for probably 6 years, and came back on like last year, maybe a year and a half ago, and have been. I pay very close attention to that. So I'd say like I like to follow a lot of the Democrats. I think they have like a lot of good ideas. Because I don't think you can just focus on like our side, but I'd say that's like that's not a great answer because Twitter's it's an amorphous thing, but that's where I spend.
I love the Twitter, man. I love the Twitter. It's
I spend a ton of time looking at that. I mean, Real Clear Politics is where I like go to see if I have like where the polls are and what's going on in the different races. But outside of that, it's pretty much just how do we raise more money? How do I find new donors? How do I get in these conversations without saying something that is going to get me blackballed from the industry? Like that's like what I'm kind of working on. Trying to build a business. Just started. So you've referenced my company. We just started in January. So we're a startup trying to figure out what we want to be when we grow up.
Yeah, there's nothing. Being an entrepreneur, man, not for amateurs. Easier to have a job for sure. John, thank you so much, man. This was great. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. And if your audience has any questions for me, I mean, you feel free to provide my contact information. You can also find me on Twitter at John K. Hall. Like, send me a note. I'm happy to answer questions or help where I can.
Love it. Perfect. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.